Welcome to the Legalpreneur Podcast. I'm your host, Andrea Sager, and I'm dedicated to covering common legal issues for small business owners and just how some of the world's most elite entrepreneurs have handled legal issues themselves. In true attorney fashion, the information in this episode is not legal advice. This is for informational purposes only, and you should always consult with your attorney before implementing any of the information. Now, on to the show. Hello. Welcome back to the Legalpreneur Podcast. This episode is going to be building on last week, where we talked about contractors versus employees and the requirements that goes into both. Because once you say, okay, I have a contractor, I have an employee, there's things you have to do to appease the lovely IRS. Nobody wants to get in trouble with them, so make sure you're paying attention and filing the right paperwork. Of course, you don't even have to worry about this if you are working with Gusto. I am such a huge proponent of Gusto because of how easily and streamlined things are run on my back end. I don't have to worry about filing reports, paying taxes, like they just do it for me. Like, yeah, I still have to pay the money, but they just file the reports for me. They pay the taxes for me. Seriously, I don't have to worry about anything. All right, let's get started. Okay, so after you have made the determination of whether you're going to hire a contractor or an employee, there are requirements that you have to meet. Trust me, you don't want to not meet these requirements because you can be penalized by the government. Nobody wants that to happen to them. Before your business journey even starts, it can quickly come to a demise. So if you hire a contractor, it does not matter how much money you pay them. They still have to report that income on their taxes. I know there's a rumor going around. I hear it all the time. Oh, you don't have to claim it unless you're making over $600. Not true at all. When you have a contractor, you want to make sure that they give you a W-9. This is where you get their business information. You get all the necessary information in order for you to give them a 1099. And this is where you hear like, oh, are they an employee or a 1099 contractor? People refer to them as a million different things, and that's because they receive a 1099 at the beginning of the following year. Typically by January 31st, these things have to be sent to them. If they're a sole proprietor, it's just their address, their name, their social security number. If they have a business entity and an EIN, this is where their EIN goes. So make sure you have a fully completed W-9 when you hire a contractor because you will need it to issue a 1099. Now, do you issue a 1099 for everybody? You can. However, you don't have to file a 1099 and send it to them unless you pay them more than $600. This is where the confusion is. People think, oh, if I don't receive a 1099, then I don't have to report the income. Not true. You still have to report the income even if you don't receive a 1099. 1099s are not required if a business doesn't pay you more than $600. There are a few exceptions in there. Definitely chat with your accountant. But for the most part, just always get a W-9 and always submit a 1099. Of course, this is all done in Gusto. I don't have to worry about any of this. Everything is seriously just streamlined for me. I have to emphasize how important it is to make sure that your contractors are still reporting their income. And you always want to make sure your contractors know you are not paying taxes on behalf of them. Because they're a contractor, they have to pay their own taxes. So they need to make sure they're saving enough money for those taxes. Good rule of thumb is saving 30%. Sometimes you may want to save 50%. It just depends what tax bracket you're in. That's the requirements for a contractor and making sure that you appease the IRS. Again, don't upset the IRS. They're not a fun crew to mess with. I can promise you that. Now, if you hire an employee, there's a few things you got to do. Number one, when you hire an employee, there's a bunch of paperwork they have to fill out, including a W-4. This is their tax withholding. You also have to verify. It's like the I-9 verification. This is ensuring they are properly allowed to work in the U.S. After they've worked for you, The following year, you issue them a W-2. So when somebody comes to me actually and says, hey, I'm going to hire somebody, I'm like, okay, so are you making them a 1099 or a W-2? That's typically the question I ask, because when people say, hey, I'm going to hire somebody, they don't actually know if they're going to hire a contractor or an employee. We chat about it, then we make the determination. So if you hear somebody say, oh yeah, I'm a W-2 employee, or I'm going to hire a W-2 employee, that's what they mean, an actual true employee. Again, as I stated last week, it actually doesn't matter what you call someone. It just depends on how the relationship is and what goes into that relationship. Again, the most important thing that goes into it is control. How much control do you have over the person doing the work? And that will determine whether they should be a contractor or an employee. Again, this W-2 has to be available to the employee January of the following year. I think the deadline is January 31st. Typically, it's available much sooner. Again, I use Gusto. Gusto does all that for me. I haven't even touched any of that stuff since I've been using Gusto, because they take care of all of it for me. Now, it doesn't matter how much they make. With contractors, you don't have to issue the 1099 unless you pay them more than $600. With an employee, you could pay them $50, decide you hate them and want to fire them, but you still have to issue a W-2 the following January. So it doesn't matter how much you pay them. On top of, they have to fill out the W-4, doing all that paperwork, you have to issue a W-2. You also have to withhold taxes. So if you're manually doing this, which I don't suggest, and even if your accountant is doing this themselves, I can't believe accountants still do this, because Gusto is so easy and it's super cheap. You have to make sure you're setting aside money for self-employment taxes, FICA, Social Security, all those taxes. You have to pay those as the employer. So even if you're paying them a salary of $40,000 a year, you're paying out of pocket, or the business is paying out of pocket, probably $45,000 to $50,000 on top of the actual salary. And they're not actually taking home $40,000. They have taxes taken out, and you have to pay more taxes. So the fun side of being a business owner, this is what goes into it. So never forget about your taxes. When you have an employee, you have to pay so much more taxes. When you have a contractor, you tell them you're going to pay them $1,000 for this job. That's all you're paying them. That's the requirements for a contractor and employee. There's a few other things in there, but this will get you started. Always chat with your accountant, chat with your attorney if you aren't sure what you should be hiring, a contractor or an employee. If you haven't listened to last week's episode, make sure to go listen to it, because you do not want to get this classification wrong. As I stated last week, if you get in trouble because you paid somebody as a contractor when you should have been paying them as an employee, not only do you have to pay back taxes, but you also have to pay a penalty. So I actually have a client going through this right now. Not that they should have been an employee, but contractors think they're slick and they're like, oh, I'm going to make a claim with the Workforce Commission or whoever they report it to and get more money. That's when they start investigating you. So even if you think, oh, the government's not going to worry about me, guess who is worried about you? The contractors. Even if you didn't mean to screw them over, and typically you're not trying to screw somebody over, you just don't know the rules, the laws. You don't know what goes into it. This is why you have to educate yourself. So if you're thinking, oh, I don't need to worry about it, the government's never going to find out about me, it's not because the government is out looking. The contractor will get upset about something and they will go report you. And that's how the investigation starts. So don't think you're going to just fly under the radar of the IRS or your Workforce Commission or whatever government agency. You can always be found out. So, and again, make your contractors happy. Not saying that it's always going to happen. And I'm not saying that contractors rightfully make the claim. Sometimes they're just assholes. Excuse my language, but sometimes they're just assholes and want to make a mess about something they shouldn't be. Anyways, make sure you make the right classification. Make sure you're maintaining the correct paperwork, issuing the right, whether it's a 1099 or a W-2, always make sure that's getting done. Again, I'm a huge proponent of Gusto. You can sign up with my affiliate link. I think you get $100 or $200 in Amazon gift cards as soon as you run your first payroll. Don't forget to run these reports. If you use Gusto, you don't have to even remember. They just do it for you. go to the show notes, get my affiliate link, sign up, and you can see how easy it is. All right, you guys, I'm out. I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know if you have any questions. And that's another thing. If you have questions, reach out on stories, reach out on Instagram, shoot me an email. We're always here to help you guys. And a lot of these podcast episodes actually come from questions from listeners or clients. Because I know if these are frequently asked questions with my clients, then I know they're frequently asked questions for many other people as well who don't have somebody to go to ask. So don't be afraid to ask. Alrighty, I'm out. Have a great week. If you found this information helpful, I would be so grateful if you could share it with a fellow business owner. And it doesn't cost anything to rate, review, or subscribe to the show. Your support helps me reach more listeners, which allows me to support more business owners in their entrepreneurial journey. I'll see you next episode.